Hey, good evening. I'm going to call, this is Jim Krug, Chair. I'm going to call the October 28th POSAC committee meeting to order. The first item of business is the, I'm sorry, let's do the roll call first. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. Jen Archuleta.
Present.
Paula Fitzgerald.
I'm here.
Stephen will be absent tonight, recuse himself. Trace Baker.
I'm here.
Ann Oberchain. Tony Lewis.
I am here.
Janet George.
Present.
Heather Williams.
Present.
Great, thanks. Hey, good evening all. And the first item of business is the approval of the September 23rd, 2021 meeting minutes. At this time, the chair will entertain a motion.
It's Trace Baker. I move approval of the October minutes. I'm sorry, September minutes.
Is there a second?
I second. Second.
Second. Discussion, any additions, corrections, omissions, suggestions? Not being any, let's move to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, same side. Those recused, or I'm sorry, I will recuse myself, excuse myself as I was not at the meeting, so I will go as abstain. Okay. The next item of business is public participation of items not on the agenda. I want to remind folks there's no public comments tonight on the Cropland policy. Hopefully those were all taken last week, but I'm going to ask, is there any items on the agenda for public participation? Is there anybody signed up to speak to us tonight?
No one has signed up to speak. If any of the attendees would like to speak for items not on the agenda, they can raise their hand.
Okay.
Okay.
That being none, we'll move to the next item, which is the updates to the Cropland policy. And we'll have some discussion afterwards, obviously a deliberation and a recommendation. But I think first we have Cassandra's presentation. And with that, if she's set to go, please go ahead.
Hi, yes. So give me just a moment to share my screen. All right, everybody seeing that?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes. Mhm.
All right, so I'm Cassandra Schnarr. I'm an agricultural resource specialist in the Agricultural and Water Resources Division of Parks and Open Space. Division Manager Mike Foster's away, so I'm here to give you a really brief recap of the information Mike presented at the joint public hearing with the commissioners and POSAC on October 19th. At the joint hearing, we provided updates on agricultural activities on open space properties, and we presented recommendations for amendments to the 2017 Cropland policy. Since tonight you're discussing the recommendations, I'm going to skip over all of the updates and go straight into reviewing the recommendations. The first is related to the neonicotinoid pesticides. The original recommendation was to keep the planned phase out of the neonicotinoid pesticides that would be effective at the end of this year. Based on feedback from our tenant farmers and further discussions, we adjusted the recommendation, that's in red, to allow neonicotinoid coatings on sugar beet seeds. The terms of the contracts that accompany the sugar beet shares obligate the farmers to grow sugar beets and limit their seed choice. In order to control the insect vectors for the curly top virus that could heavily impact the sugar beet industry, Western Sugar requires neonicotinoid seed coatings. Our tenants must fulfill their contracts, and they rely on Boulder County agricultural open space lands as an essential part of their crop rotations and planting areas. The second recommendation is to develop a soil health program as part of our comprehensive approach to agricultural management. The third recommendation is for the genetically engineered corn and sugar beet varieties allowed under Section 6 of the 2012 cropland policy to be grown on Boulder County Parks and Open Space land. There was a 2-year transition plan to investigate alternative crops and non-GE corn varieties. That was run by our consultants, Mad Ag. The transition period involved field trials of crops and efforts to develop markets. There were not enough markets for alternative crops to substitute for the 1,200 acres of GE corn planted each year. Direct substitution of non-genetically engineered corn for the genetically engineered corn was not economically viable, as the non-GE seed and crop production costs were widely variable. There are current relationships between farmers and markets that can offer premiums over commodity prices currently with what they're doing now, while there were no market opportunities on the Front Range that offered premiums for non-GE corn. The final recommendation is for streamlining the cropland policy. The policy is our handbook for how agricultural lands are managed, and tenants are required to follow this policy as part of their lease agreements. Having clarity in this document helps to ensure that everyone is clear on what we want to achieve. Tenants and staff know what's expected of them. The public knows how we manage our agricultural properties. The current cropland policy is 65 pages and is a complex mix of background information, draft operating procedures, policy, and in some cases, contradictory information. Our goal is to clean up the document and present the language in a way so the policy intent is clear to the reader. So here's an example, and I know it's too small to read, it's just to give you an idea. So we've got on one side a copy of page 6 of the 2012 policy. So near the list near the top of the page is a list of other policies related to parks and open space and the dates they were developed. We would cut things like that list. So cut that and then instead just insert hyperlinks where those policies are referenced within the cropland policy. The blue box contains a history of early agriculture in Boulder County. We would move information like this to elsewhere on the Parks and Open Space website. Redline versions of the proposed amendments would be made available for public review and comment in early November. And we recommend also sending you guys the streamlined version in time for your November 18th meeting. Then public and POSAC feedback would be reviewed and shared with the commissioners prior to their public meeting on December 7th. So public comments were open through today, and as of 5:45, we had 196 comments. They really ran the spectrum from liking the GMO phase out, not liking the GMO phase out. Same with neonicotinoids. There were very few people who didn't support the soil health initiative, and many people were excited about eliminated pesticide usage altogether. So next steps, after all of you discuss and send your recommendations to the commissioners, they will deliberate and have their decision meeting on November 4th, and then on December 7th, they will consider those updates to the cropland policy. So that's your very fast recap.
Very nice. Thank you, Cassandra. Hey, I think the way, if everybody agrees this is okay to deliberate, is, and I don't want you, Cassandra, to feel like, I'm sure you have the staff behind you in full force, so that you don't attempt to or we don't put you on the spot to answer all the questions, but I'll refer these as questions to the staff in general. How's that? And I'll start, and then I'll throw it to Jen Archuleta, because Jen and I'm sure we chatted briefly. This is for us a little bit deja vu all over again, because we went through the 2016. I was just on to the POSAC, and we went through the hearing and whatever. And as you know, the commissioners overruled us. I mean, I think our POSAC vote was 5-3, 6-3, something like that. And the commissioners voted 2-1. And that's their right, of course. I mean, I'm not saying that they shouldn't have done that. I'm just saying is that we went through the hearing, went through the process, made a recommendation, was rejected. So I say that to the POSAC members as we start the discussion tonight, is that to me, this is an issue if you go back to the retreat in February, one of the reasons I recommended I wanted to sit down, or us as a group meet with the commissioners, is some of the issues that I thought were going to come up this year. We ought to sort of see where their heads were at, where they were coming from, so we could not necessarily be in unison, but at least know where the general trends are, what their thinking is. So we did, some POSAC members felt blindsided the last time around. So that's my only comment. I think I've heard so much comment and read so much about this. I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but I would just say that for the staff, I think that with Mike, I mean, with the changeover, with Jeff having to jump in, with Blake, the changes that went on, I would like to see the agriculture group in POSAC settle down, so to speak, and see some long-term, hopefully, somebody in that role, and see that group settle down a little bit. And so that's my only comment. And so I've said in so much of this that I don't have any questions. So I'll shut up and refer it to Jen, and then we'll just ask each POSAC member if they have a question or an observation. Those of you who sat in last week, please make it. We'll ask everybody, and then if need be, we have Conrad is with us. If we need be and a sensitive topic come up, we can go into executive session if need be. But I want to make sure people are get their questions answered, and then we'll move into voting on the recommendations, if that's okay. So with that, I'll throw it to Jen Archuleta.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jim, and thanks, Cassandra. I have a few questions. Starting with feedback from the ag staff. Where did you get your information on neonicotinoids?
So on the neonicotinoids, we did some of our own research, and then we also spoke with some people up at CSU, in particular Lisa, and I'm blanking on her last name at the moment, but she was part of the commissioner joint hearing, and she spoke there. She is a pesticide safety instructor up at CSU, so she has a lot of experience with pesticides.
And with the staff that you spoke with, how much, combined agriculture experience do they have? Are any of them farmers? Have any of them been farmers? I'm just curious about where the information is coming.
So as for the background of ag staff, we have several people who grew up on farms. We've got staff that have been working in Boulder County Parks and Open Space for upwards of, I would say, 15 years or more. So that have been deeply involved in agriculture. Others have experience, with commodity trading, things like that. So I don't think anyone is currently farming on a large scale, but yeah, several have farming backgrounds.
Okay, so then I have a few other questions. Sorry, I'm going to ask more than probably my share, but so we also have, the county also has climate goals. And in talking with some of the farmers, I'm not a farmer, I don't have ag background, so I spoke with a lot of them to try and find out what it is that you are doing when you're working the land. And the beet farmers do a no-till or like a strip till that allows them to plant without having to plow. And so there's a certain amount of carbon sequestration in that process. With respect to the GMO corn, so for example, at Rock Creek Farm, he doesn't necessarily have to do too much between his pumpkins and his corn. And so he actually sees that the GMO crop traits benefit his pumpkin rotation. And so with that, there's some carbon sequestration, and it uses less water, puts less carbon into the environment. How are we going to meet our climate goals while simultaneously changing the process? Not necessarily beets, because if we're going to let that go, but there are other GMO crops as well that benefit from the no-till, strip-till kind of process.
I'm not sure I'm following quite. So how are we meeting our climate goals with regards to tillage?
Right.
So
And how will we
every-
meet it if we change to this policy?
So if we allow the GMO crops, then is what we're recommending, is that we allow the GMO Roundup Ready MBT corn to be planted. So it doesn't really necessarily require tillage. What one might do if there was a weed issue was do more intensive tillage to kill the weed population, suppress the weed population. But you're right, every time we till, every time we disturb the soil, we are really ramping up those microbial communities. So, and they plow through all the residues and things, and they release carbon. So the less we can disturb the soil, the more carbon is sequestered, the healthier our soils, the more resilient they are to climate, the better they hold on to water. So, you know, if we use the GE crops, say the Roundup Ready corn, and there needs to be less tillage because there's less weed pressure between crops, say between the corn and the pumpkins, or the corn and whatever the next crop is, the better, frankly. The less tillage, the better.
Okay. And then I guess I have another question. I didn't really see much in the policy about making sure we stay on the forefront of tech advancements in GE and GE crops and that sort of thing. So if we sort of decide that we're not going to allow these things, but then in the future something comes up that's created that actually is better, are we still going to keep looking at that, or are we just going to be done with those things?
So depending on what all of you and the commissioners recommend, in the 2017 policy, cropland policy, the amendments that were made to that around the GE crops does allow us to look at new GE technologies, in particular GE traits that would be related to things that are not pesticide related. So by pesticide related, I mean like Roundup Ready corn or other herbicide tolerant traits. So if we were looking at GE varieties that had traits related to drought tolerance or increased nutritional value, the 2017 policy does allow us to examine those and allow those in the future.
And one last question. If we do away with the certain GE and neonics, that doesn't necessarily mean we are not going to be spraying anything. I mean, we are going to most likely be spraying more because we don't have these resistant crops. And so how are we sort of justifying any kind of safe environment? Or I feel like people, especially, you know, I sat through 6 hours of public comment, and it seemed like a lot of people just sort of thought that if we got rid of these things, that there wouldn't be any other spraying, but there would be, to my understanding, have to be a lot more spraying of pesticides and herbicides. Is that a correct understanding?
So that is a potential trade-off. So to address the first part is yes. So if you have, say, Roundup Ready corn, you don't have to spray Roundup. It's just Roundup Ready corn is herbicide tolerant. So if you have a weed issue after the corn is already, you know, growing, then we can, you know, the tenant can spray Roundup and kill those weeds without harming the corn. It doesn't mean, even if we ban GMO crops and we ban Roundup Ready corn or anything else, it doesn't mean that Roundup is not being sprayed. It's just not being sprayed while the crop is growing. So, and the same, and that holds true of other pesticides, so other herbicides and insecticides. So what can happen? Agriculture is all about trade-offs.
Yeah.
So, you know, what can happen is if you get so much weed pressure, then perhaps, you know, if I was a farmer, I might let that field sit fallow for a season and then spray it several times and maybe even till it to, you know, bring up that seed bank, that weed seed bank, and then spray it again to really chop out those weeds and get rid of them. So So it's not a guarantee that there would be more spraying if we don't have the GE crops. It's just the potential is there. And like I said, it's all about trade-offs. You know, when you don't allow those herbicide tolerant traits, it means you've got the potential for other issues instead.
Okay, sorry, one last question based on what
Yep.
you just said. So if we had to have a farmer have his field stay fallow because he wasn't able to deal with those weeds, is there some kind of trust fund or a fund available from the county that would compensate them for that loss?
Not that I know of. I've only been here 15 months. So, you know, I'm still learning a lot. I don't think so. I think they could request, you know, some kind of compensation or help. And that would have to kind of be reviewed. I know in the past, we've had some properties that have been in pretty rough shape when we have received them. And so there's been discounts on the rent while we, you know, work with the tenant to say, you know, plant cover crops. We help them pay for cover crop seed and things like that while they kind of rehabilitate the property and bring it up to speed.
Okay. Thank you, Jen.
Thanks.
Hey, Janet George. Janet, do you have some questions?
Not at this time. I had a lot of questions before the commissioners meeting, but between the staff presentations and the questions that have been asked up to this date, I don't have any more. Great
Thank
job, by the way.
Thank you, Janet. And Trace Baker. Trace?
Yes, Trace Baker here. First, I'd like to thank the public for participating in the October 19th joint meeting and for providing written comments online, and thank the staff for its work on the policy. And what I found as I was preparing for this meeting, this is a very complex topic with some very hard constraints that may make it difficult to find a solution that works for the farmers and for the non-farming public interest. Both sides were making their points with quite a bit of passion, and I'd like to find some language to put in the policy that would address both. First of all, I think a very naive question, but not being a farmer, I'll ask it. If a farmer grows GE corn without applying glyphosate, what happens? Do they lose the crop? Do they lose some profit? Do they lose quality of the crop? What's feasibility there?
Right. So, okay, let's imagine you are a farmer and you plant your, you know, Roundup ready corn. That does not require you to spray Roundup in order for your corn to grow.
Right.
What it is, it just allows you, if you have weed pressure after the emergence of your corn, you can spray Roundup and kill those weeds without harming your corn crop. It does not, there's no mechanism whereby you spray the Roundup on the corn and it makes the corn grow better or anything like that.
Okay, but if you choose to not spray, can the weeds be removed mechanically and, you know, just eat the cost of doing that? What's the alternative there, if any?
Yeah, so you really aren't gonna like walk out with a hoe and like hack down the weeds by hand on, you know, a couple hundred acres. What you're going to do is you're going to look at your cost trade-offs.
Yes.
What is the weed pressure? Is it enough that it's going to impact your yields? You know, is it going to take up enough water? Is it going to block out the growth of your corn? So is that weed pressure enough to make it worthwhile to you to spend the money to buy the glyphosate, to get out in the field, use up the fuel to spray the field? So those are the trade-offs you're looking at. Does your yield hit that you take from having weeds outweigh the cost of spraying those weeds? And if
Okay.
your weed pressure is not that high, you're not going to spray. I mean, nobody in business is going to, spend money they don't have to.
Right. Okay, thank you, Cassandra. Looking at Mike Foster's hearing memo, he said, following harvest this year, MADAG will assess costs, yield, and revenue differences and share that information. Has that analysis been done, and is there a publication date set for that?
So Tanner from MADAG is on the call. He can jump in as well. They're still in the midst of, harvest and everything like that. So they're still getting those numbers in and all of that. MADAG is set to get us their final reports in by December 10th.
Okay. And when that report is received, how will the work influence anything that farmers are doing, anything the county is doing, or any future changes to the cropland policy?
So that information is available to our tenant farmers, and it's really available to anyone. So the work that MADAG has done in examining, say, developing markets and things, so all that contact information is in there. All of the information about what's during their trials of different heritage wheat varieties, which wheat varieties grew best, which were most desirable in the market, because the wheat then, after it's harvested, gets tested for protein levels, gluten levels, things like that. So which of those ended up being most desirable for the markets? That's all available. So any tenant or any farmer in Boulder County or in the state really who would like that information, it's available.
Okay, thank you. Another point mentioned in the hearing memo, Ag Division has been willing to cover half the expense of organic certification. Is that certification expense that the county will contribute to, is that a one-time thing, or does it have to be renewed, and will the county contribute to each renewal?
So far, we have been willing to contribute to each renewal, and it kind of is a tenant by tenant basis, whether they are interested in taking us up on that or not. And we also discount rent on the transition period moving towards organic. We discount rent by 50% as well. So there have been issues recently with getting enough certifiers to be able to certify a crop as organic. It's just they've been very busy, and our tenant farmers have frankly had a really hard time getting anyone to schedule coming to see their farms.
Okay, so continuing on, a lot of the public input that was received expressed the desire to see Boulder County farms produce more organic crops, to move away from GE, to move away from the sprays. So with that public input, would it be feasible for the county to cover more of the cost of certification as an incentive for more farmers to treat their crops organically?
That's a possibility. I think a larger question really needs to be asked before we move in that direction, though, which is what are the trade-offs with moving towards organic? And what is it that people would like to achieve by requiring organic? Is it that they want less spraying of pesticides and herbicides? Is it some other goals that they want achieved through organic? There are trade-offs, like I said, with all of agriculture. With organic, you're not spraying the weeds, so you're doing a lot more tillage and a lot more disturbing of the soil. That has really serious implications for erosion and soil health and carbon sequestration. So that's a trade-off that where going organic is actually, can be detrimental to those things. And organic is not necessarily appropriate on every property and every kind of data set that goes along with a property. The water that's available, the land that's available, the size of the property.
Okay, thank you. Last question here. The policy has not set a timeline for future changes that would phase out GE seeds and the use of glyphosate. And would it be appropriate to ask county commissioners to put a timeline into the policy for further movement towards getting away from GE seeds and getting away from spraying any of these pesticides under discussion?
As far as I know, and like I said earlier, I've only been with the county about 15 months. As far as I know, in none of the past discussions has like banning glyphosate been a part of the discussion in the banning of GE crops. I know it's been brought up by the public, but as far as I've seen, it's not been an actual proposal. So I really don't know anything about a timeline for banning spraying of any kind of pesticides. That's not really addressed in the cropland policy. Within the cropland policy, there is a method to look at and examine genetically engineered crops and whether they should be planted on county land. And that is a review process that starts if the USDA approves a genetically engineered crop, then 3 years later, Boulder County is allowed to assess it to see whether it's appropriate. And then we can review that assessment every 5 years.
Okay, Cassandra,
Thanks,
thank
Tracy.
you.
Hey, Cassandra, I'm gonna move to Tony Lewis next, but I'm gonna give you 30 seconds or a minute to get a drink of water or something, because we're like machine guns firing questions at you, but I want you to get a second.
All right, thank you.
Okay. And Tony, are you there?
I'm way here.
There you go, Tony. Whenever you can.
Cassandra, you ready for more?
Let's go.
Okay. I want to look at a couple of things and just ground us in some of the acreage that we're talking about, and maybe also go back to the last point that Trace Baker made, which is I think there was a recommendation by the county commissioners, if I'm not mistaken, to eliminate glyphosate and to eliminate GE seeds. I'll go back and look, but I thought that's what I read in the for the 2019 recommendations. But we'll get back to that. I also want to echo Trace Baker in thanking the public for the amazing 6 hours of testimony the other night, and it was good to have that input by a lot of people. So I really appreciate that. Part of what I want to do is just review how many acres we're really talking about here, because I feel like sometimes it's just this big ethereal concept. And if I'm reading the cropland policy right, there's about 1,500 acres, which is about 9% of open space croplands used to grow GE crops. And of those, I think it says 278 are sugar beets and 1,225 are corn. Is that right? Does that sound right?
Yeah, so forgive me if this gets a little sloppy here. I'm going to share my screen again, and it might take me a second to the right slide for you. Let's see. And is it showing you anything? Let's see. There we go. Can you see the map?
Yes,
okay.
that's
so,
yeah.
Okay, so rather than just talking numbers, you can actually see them here. So all of Boulder County Parks and Open Space agricultural land is 25,000 acres. 16,000 of that is cropland. Of the 16,000 cropland acres, about 1,500 are planted in GE crops this year. So it fluctuates slightly because our tenants and pretty much any farmer is going to have crop rotations. So they're going to rotate their crops, and with the mix of private lands and open space lands. So the GE crops, the fluctuation in acreage is there slightly. And then on here is also the organic acreage. But when we look at those 16,000 cropland acres, you can see that the GE corn is about 6%, and the GE sugar beets is about 1% of the total cropland acres.
Can you talk a little bit about the organic transition? Is that moving from just traditional methods, not necessarily GE, but
right, yeah. So from conventional agriculture to organic. So it takes about a 3-year transition period in order to go through for organic certification. It has to have been not sprayed with certain pesticides and herbicides and things for a period of 3 years before it can be certified. A crop on that land can be certified organic. So during that transition period, that's that 10%.
And can you just talk a little bit, Cassandra, about the 77% of the other POS cropland? Like, what does that look like? Is that conventional ag? Is that corn? And
it's mostly conventional ag. So we've got all kinds of crops. We've got alfalfa. We've got grass that gets hayed, barley. I can pull up a list here in a moment, but so yes, that's some of it is just fallow, as part of a crop rotation. So it's a whole variety of things. On our open space land, we've got all kinds of farms, everything from small organic acreage to really large commodity farms.
Yep. So on that 77%, are we currently, I assume we're currently allowing the conventional ag to use pesticides, to use herbicides? And what are they using there? Are they using Roundup? Are they using glyphosate?
Sure. Some of them are using Roundup and glyphosate. A couple of the other herbicides that are used often is dicamba. And then 2,4-D is another one. And then let's see, I think
neonics.
I'm sorry?
Any neonics or?
We don't have our tenants reporting that they use any sprayed neonicotinoid insecticides. So we haven't seen that.
Okay. Could they be using neonics coated seeds, or is that possible?
Yes, they could be, but part of the phase out is, everyone has known that the neonics would be phased out at the end of this year. So not just our 9 GE tenant farmers, but all of our tenants know that. Okay.
And then the recommendation by staff, the first recommendation is to phase out the neonics except for the GE beets, correct?
Correct. Okay. Since our beets are, our tenant farmers who grow beets are just, their hands are really tied with their contracts, and they need to honor those contracts. So they don't really have a choice.
Yeah, I get the honoring of the contracts. I think I'm a little disturbed by the feeling that we are not in a position, it doesn't seem, of making good decisions about this land. We're in a position of responding to Great Western Sugar's contracts. It's a little frustrating for me personally, because I feel like those contracts may go on forever or until Great Western goes bankrupt. And there's no clear sign that they're on their way to bankruptcy. So it feels like we are not setting policy that our tenant farmers are responding to. We're reacting to contracts from Great Western that don't allow us to set policy or make it more difficult, I'll say, to set policy.
Right, I can recognize that. I also understand that several years, several being, I don't know how many, 10 years ago, maybe, and somebody else with more experience and background might know it better. But Parks and Open Space did encourage the tenant farmers to purchase sugar beet shares. At the time, it was seen as a very solid way of, balancing out their crop rotations and things. And so it was encouraged at the time. So,
by staff?
I think so. Like I said, somebody who's been here longer might know better. I think either, by the director of Parks and Open Space. I'm treading into territory here that I don't really know well.
I think, hey Cassandra, I'll just throw out, yes, I think, Tony, that is something to take into consideration. I mean, I don't think anybody put a gun to their head, but yes, they were encouraged to do that. So there is to me, some responsibility there.
Therese, did you want to? Yeah.
Yeah, this is Therese Glowacki, Director of Parks and Open Space. My understanding is that it was encouraged, but it was in the early 2000s. So, 18 to 20 years ago,
Right.
when, it seemed like it was a good, like Cassandra said, a good way for farmers to have guaranteed place to sell their sugar beets and include that in their rotations.
Yeah. Thanks, Therese.
Um,
Okay, Tony,
sorry, Jim, I got a couple more questions, buddy.
can I come back to you and we'll get Paula and Heather's voices in the room?
Absolutely.
I promise to come back to you. Paula?
Sorry, I had to unmute. First, I want to apologize that I was not able to make it. I was out of town last week, so couldn't make the big meeting. I've been trying to do my homework since then, but oh my God, complex subject here. And I feel really split in terms of, honoring the farmers, understanding their job is very difficult, but also we need to move forward. Could you talk, Cassandra, this has been really helpful, but could you talk a little bit more about the sugar beet contracts and the auto renewal sort of thing? Is there no end date at all that, these farmers can get out of this seemingly fairly oppressive contract without paying an arm and a leg? And I mean, it just seems like it goes on forever, like Tony mentioned, that it's just going to continue.
Right. I really can't speak to the contracts. So I would be calling Conrad if he's available to answer that question.
Yeah, this is Conrad. We have not seen any of these contracts. So because Western Sugar makes them confidential, and what I can guess from the fact that our tenant farmers understand that we are trying to help them out of these contracts, and they still will not show us the contracts, that they believe that they are not entitled to share them with us. So we know some about what is in the contracts, but we have not read them.
Okay. So another question I have is on the organic certification. And it sounds like the county is working hard to assist the farmers in that process. I guess for me, is there any assistance towards moving in that direction, but maybe not to a full certification, basically doing everything but going through that rigorous certification process?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and we do have some tenants who don't find the expense of certification to be worth it, that the premiums they get for organic crops are not worth the extra expense and difficulty of getting the certification. So, we are always willing to work with our tenant farmers on, anything. I think especially with our new focus on soil health and trying to come up with develop a program for that. I think there's probably, and Therese can, back me up here, Therese, there's, support for helping to pay for expenses like cover crop seed, like compost or manure applications, things like that. So yes, I think there's a lot of support within Parks and Open Space to do these things that aren't necessarily exactly organic certifications, but move in those directions that people are wanting to get from an organic certification.
And I would just add that, and I don't have, 20 years of experience in this world either, but we do have farmers who have decided to do non-conventional farming. So they're transitioning to organic. We have assisted them in the 3 years. And then they've found that it is profitable, that they are making a good, healthy living, even without going through the certification process. So therefore, the need for assistance for, half rent goes away. So I would say that's our balance, is we don't want to be giving someone a subsidy if they're making a good income,
Yeah.
even if it isn't transition to organic.
'Cause I like the carrot approach to moving in the right direction as strongly as we can. Going back to sugar beets, do you have, Cassandra, any information on how many of our farmer leasers own other lands within the area that they're allowed to grow under their sugar beet contract, where they could shift that sugar beet cropping to those other non-Boulder County owned lands? You have that?
Yes. So of the 5 farmers that are growing sugar beets, 4 have other lands they can, shift to. The thing is with sugar beets, you're on usually a minimum of a 4-year rotation. So you don't want them, growing in the same field more frequently than every 4 years or more. So you're really limited. It's not like you can, just pop them back and forth from one field to the next. They really need to be part of a longer term rotation. And that means you need access to more land. So as it is right now, it's really difficult for even those 4 tenant farmers to have access to enough space to fulfill those sugar beet shares, because each share is equal to 1 acre of sugar beets. So to, grow the acreage needed, it's just not really feasible.
Yeah, and since we encouraged them to do it, we've got some skin in the game. In terms of spraying on so Roundup Ready crops, okay, presuming there's weed pressure, I presume, and the Cropland policy talks about integrated pest management, which talks about being targeted, specific, minimizing the amount of pesticide use. Those things do go hand in hand, correct? So even if you're growing that crop, you have some weed pressure, you're still going to use IPM to try to control your outbreak of whatever it is, whether weed or insect or.
Right. So there, with integrated pest management, there's, several steps and principles that come into play, and part of that is kind of beforehand identifying your threshold for what your weed pressure is before you want to, apply something. And like I talked about before, that's part of a trade-off of, how much are the weeds costing you versus how much are you spending to control them. Within the county, I think it would do well. We would do well as part of our, we have the soil health program initiative. I think we could develop a stronger integrated pest management program to work with our tenant farmers so that we are all kind of on the same page. And so we're working together to really set those thresholds and look at how do we control weeds. Part of the weed control with a Roundup Ready corn, for instance, is you've got a crop in the ground. It's shading out the weeds. It's out competing them. So that's, your crop and your crop rotation is actually part of your pest management strategy.
Good. So my last question, Jim, I'll try to wrap it up here, but also in the information we talked about the compost cover crop study that's been going on for 2 years now. When will we get an update on how well that's working?
Mm-hmm. So the crop study with CSU,
Mm-hmm.
I assume, yes. So I think at the end of this year, I'm not as familiar with that study. So I can find out and let you know. But I think at the end of this year, early next year, we can have some more information for you about that.
That'd be great. If that can be brought back to us, because I think that's very
Sure.
interesting
Mm-hmm.
study. So
Good,
thank
good
you.
point. Thank you, Paul. Heather Williams. Heather, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Any
Thank you. Well, actually, I had a couple questions, but they've been answered over the course of the last few questions. So I don't have any
Good.
additional questions.
Thank you. And as promised, we'll loop back to Tony.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it. Cassandra, I was reading in the comments by the two former commissioners, Deb Gardner and Elise Jones. I was trying to understand. They were saying that Bayer announced in July they'd stop selling Roundup to U.S. consumers. Is that accurate?
So they will stop selling it to like residential use. So it would still be sold for certified applicators. Okay. So that would be, you know, anyone that goes through kind of a certified applicator process and classes. So farmers, you know, your lawn maintenance companies, things like that would still have it available. So, you know, there are speculations, you know, that's partially the result of, you know, lawsuits or something. And things like that, those kind of financial pressures. So yes, it will not be there. It's not a law or something, right? It's Bayer's choice that they're deciding not to sell it on the residential market.
Great, thank you. Last question, and maybe this may be a Therese question, I'm not sure. What I can't quite understand in reviewing the old cropland policy, and Therese, maybe you have the history on this, maybe more than Cassandra, so she's only been there a little while. Have the county commissioners, or have you guys as staff clearly articulated where you want the croplands to go? Is it towards organic? Is it towards a mix of properties? Is it towards conventional? Like, it's unclear to me where we're trying to get. And that's what's making it difficult for me to understand what kind of recommendation to make, because I have no clear idea where we're trying to go.
Yeah, well, what I would say is that in the 2012, the county commissioners that approved the 2012 cropland policy approached it with an all types of farmers are welcome on county open space. And they approved the two types of genetically engineered crops, the two crops with re-engineered traits. And they said that we realized that with the market the way they are, and with farmers knowing that you can't create a farmer tomorrow, that there's a lot of, you know, education and experience that go into becoming a farmer, that it does not, there's no realistic scenario in our future that would say all 25,000 acres could turn into organic farming. Even, you know, not, they didn't say we want it in a year or 10 years or 20 years. It just does not seem feasible in their worldview, and we support that. We've been working with CSU, and many of our farmers have for 20 years or more, trying to encourage more organic farming, and it's just not an easy task. So our approach, and then in the last group of commissioners, when they approved it, they said, we want to go with more, but they also understood the constraints. That's why they stayed with the 20% organic by 2020. We achieved that. And then, like Cassandra said, and I can verify this too, we have farmers who have had full intentions of going organic and now are finding that it is not as economical to them to go fully organic and to jump through all those hoops, that they can make as much money doing biodynamic farming and other things. So I think our goal is to keep agriculture on the land where, you know, on these 25,000 acres, and that we have to have an all approaches goal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Tony, you good?
I'm going to add to that and just say that in our cropland policy, it does say that we value all kinds of farming, and that our underlying value there is sustainable agriculture, so that no matter what type of farming someone's doing, that we're really looking at the sustainability underlying it. And, you know, on those 25,000 acres of, you know, agricultural land are split up between a huge variety of different types of land. So, and different types of property are appropriate for different types of farming. You know, a small 40-acre parcel is far more appropriate for, you know, some organic, you know, vegetable farming than a 200-acre piece with, you know, a pivot irrigation. You know, not that those things can't be done, but it's just easier and more appropriate on certain properties, depending on their layout, depending on their size, depending on their water rights that come with them.
And hey, this is Jim Krug. I was going to add a compliment to the farmers. I think the past couple of years, especially if you talk to Scott Miller or Dick Miller, and I think they've been willing to try various things and have tried. And I think if you go back and look at Blake's report to us back at the, I think it was the 2018 retreat, where he started to question, you know, the plots and the experiments that we did trying. In some regards, I guess I put it like this and leave it at this. It was in some regards to me, a solution looking for a problem, right? And so I think that I want to compliment the farmers for making the effort the past couple of years and trying various things and trying to make things work and trying to, you know, comply, as Therese said, with the various commissioners and the various requests. Okay.
I'd like to jump in one more quick time.
Yeah.
That is why we as county staff see that farming can go in a more sustainable direction and more carbon sequestering direction by focusing on soil health. And we have many farmers who are embracing that. And we have some farmers who have not yet embraced it. That's why in this policy, we want to put that up front, that we are going to be working with farmers to really get soil health as a forefront of our agriculture.
Yeah.
And Jim, I have another question if I could pop in. So the county supported and encouraged farmers to get the sugar beet leases, however many years ago that was. Is there anything, I hope that that's not being encouraged now, but is there anything in this new policy recommendation that sort of disallows that so that we don't get an even bigger problem 5-10 years from now? I'm not sure who can answer.
So no, we don't have anything like that in the current recommendations. I don't know, and maybe Therese could speak to this as well. I don't know that anyone on staff would ever want to step in into encouraging or discouraging those kinds of business decisions in that sense. You know, anything beyond, say, our organic incentives or something like that, but to actually like change someone's underlying business plan. Like I said, Therese may be able to speak to that more clearly, but for me, I wouldn't, you know, I'm not going to jump in and tell anyone that they should, you know, buy any kind of, you know, contract into any kind of contract that would tie them up like that.
Okay. Thank you, Sandra, and Mike Foster owes you a nice lunch.
Jim, I have a question, follow-up question.
Go ahead, Jen.
So with respect to Amendment 13, the neonic part, does that apply to the full 16,000, 25,000? Okay, so now my second question then would be, and I don't know if you guys thought about this and decided not to, separate out the GE portion from the neonic portion to have two separate sort of things, because it seems like the GE portion is very specific and the GE is so tied to the neonics, whereas the neonics is huge because it applies to our whole property versus just this small portion that's affected by GE. So I don't know if that's something that you guys thought about doing and then decided not to, or I'm just wondering why they got clumped together.
So that was a choice that the former commissioners made, was to put those together in that, you know, Appendix 13. So that whole issue, and I honestly, maybe somebody else can speak to this. I don't know whether that was in 2016 or 2019 when the neonics got added to the GE discussion. So, and that's what we tried to do with this memo and this, set of recommendations is kind of separate those out and say, okay, the GE transition for those genetically engineered crops, we haven't found viable alternatives. So, does it make sense to continue on this plan? Or since we have no viable alternatives, to, let that go? And then with the neonics kind of looking at, and you guys can debate whether we went the right way or not, but, looking at, so if the people of Boulder County have legitimate scientifically based concern about neonicotinoids, do we want to go ahead and keep the ban that the former commissioners put in place? And is that reasonable? And, that's worthy of a public discussion. And that's worthy of all of you deciding if you want to keep that ban or if you want to move in a direction of, stronger integrated pest management program or something like that. But yes, so we did with this memo, try to separate those two out, because they are separate things.
Yeah, I guess it just feels like after, the public comment, it feels like the GE farmers are really taking the hit for everything else. A lot of the conversation is about GE when it is such a small portion of our properties. And so I feel like more attention needs to be paid to the whole rest of them. I'm not sure how to sort of communicate that better to the commissioners outside of the memo that, that.
I don't know either. I will, as a personal aside, I will say that, I was hired about 15 months ago in part to develop a soil health program. I have not, a soil health program for all 25,000 acres that would benefit all of our agricultural open space. I have not been able to do that because I was, pretty immediately sidelined to dealing with the GE transition, because it's such a huge, messy, hairy knot of something. So, instead of a soil health program for, 25,000 acres, you've got, me focusing on GE transition for, an average of, 1,500 acres. Yeah. So what's more valuable, to the county, and what direction do we want to go in? And that's a question for all of you to decide.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I could just jump in, I just want to jump in to answer another little part of Jen's question. Is the neonicotinoid ban is not just being felt by the GE farmers. Roundup, for one thing, is not a neonicotinoid, and all farmers of that 25,000 acres will not be allowed to use neonicotinoids. So it is, every one of our farmers is being asked to comply with that portion of our recommendation.
Okay. And along those lines, the question I asked you today, Trace, was about breaking the recommendations out. And so I was thinking that we would go ahead and vote on them individually, if that's okay, right, with everybody? Is that okay with POSAC members? I have 4 recommendations.
It looks like Trey still has a question. I think you had a question before you posed that, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Therese. So both Cassandra and Therese mentioned the Soil Health Initiative. Early on in Cassandra's presentation, she had a slide on integrated pest management. And is there some overlap there?
So, all of agriculture overlaps. So, the stronger your plant health is, the more resistant your plant is going to be to any kind of, insect pressure or pest pressure of any kind. So when you are improving your soil health, what you're doing is improving the nutrient cycling in the soil. You're making more nutrients available for the plants. You're making the soil more resilient to erosion. You're making it so it's able to hold more water. So all of these things feed into the whole system of agriculture. So yes, it does play a part, not a specific direct part. It's in the same way that, say, a pesticide or something would. But yes, they all go hand in hand. It's not like you can separate out the quality or the health of the soil from the health of the plant. And you can't separate out the health of the plant from its ability to resist pest pressure.
Okay, thank you both.
Okay. Can we move? We good? The question becomes, started to pose was about the recommendations. Although there's 4 of them, the suggestion was made when I talked to the staff today about voting on them individually. Is everybody on POSAC okay with that? Rather than just all 4 as slate?
Yes.
All those in favor say aye.
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 And so at this time, maybe, maybe get us started down the right road. I'll jump in and the chair will make a motion, and the chair will make a motion of the 3rd recommendation on soil health. The county will expand work with tenants to focus on improving soil health, including carbon sequestration. Can I get a second?
Second,
Discussion.
I think the chair took the easy way out, but other than that.
We'll take the easy ones first, Tony. We'll take the easy ones first. Is there any discussion about the soil health initiative and recommendation going to the commissioners?
Yeah, Trace Baker here. You know, I'm going back to the passion expressed by members of the non-farming public, and I am inclined to vote affirmative for the soil health, and I would like to recommend that in some future version of the cropland policy, put just as much effort into a county initiative or staff initiative on integrated pest management. That's really all I have for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Trace. Any other discussion? Can we move to a vote? At this time, all those in favor of the soil health recommendation, say aye.
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 Those opposed, like sign. Any abstentions? Let the record show the soil health recommendations approved. This time, the chair will entertain a motion on the other 3 recommendations from a willing POSAC member.
I'll go ahead and move for the cleanup of the document. That's another low-hanging fruit.
Thank you, Paula. I'll second that. Discussion? Following no discussion, time to move to a vote. All those in favor of pursuing the edits of the Cropland policy recommendation, say aye.
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 Those opposed, like sign. Any abstentions? Let the record show the editing of the Cropland policy recommendation is approved. At this time, the chair will entertain a motion on the other 2 recommendations.
If I could, I'd like to break the GE crops into the 2 bullet points in the recommended changes by staff. So their first bullet point is any new request to grow these 3 crops, which are sugar beets, corn with Roundup Ready, and corn with BT traits, eligible to be approved. And their first bullet point is to grow new requests to grow these 3 crops need not be approved by ag staff, but reported to ag staff before planting. And my recommendation is that they should be approved by staff prior to moving towards that.
Paul, let me make a point of order. I would like to vote on the GE as written by the staff.
You're right.
And then I would ask you to make an amendment to that.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, just to be sort of somewhat orderly about it.
No, that's good.
So with that, the GE crop, sugar beets and corn with Roundup Ready and or BT traits can be grown on agricultural lands as outlined in section 6 of the 2012 Cropland policy, as is. Discussion.
Would you read that one more time, please, Jim?
The way the recommendation's written in is GE crops, sugar beets and corn with Roundup Ready and or BT traits can be grown on Boulder County open space agricultural lands as outlined in section 6 of the 2012 Cropland policy.
And the bullet point, Tony, was that any new GE crops don't have to be approved. They just have to be reported. So my feeling is I'd like to back off from GE crops, and I think they should be approved before, instead of just, you know, if you're in that category. I don't want to grow the acreages of these types of GE crops without staff approval.
Discussion?
I would agree with you, Paula. I appreciate that perspective. I guess I'm still having a tough time understanding why we wouldn't phase out Roundup Ready crops other than sugar beets.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's sort of in the second bullet point is any other GE crop would need to be reviewed and approved by staff prior to planting. So we're requiring approval for any new other types of crops that are GE, but we're accepting sugar beets and the corn. And I think the whole thing should have staff review and approval before it's planted, if it's new acreage. So if it's under the existing lease, I don't think there's anything we're going to do about it, at least in the near term future. But again, to not grow these acres and have them get larger every year, I think it should be thoughtfully done with the crop reviewed, the safety of it, you know, just an understanding of what they're proposing, and have that approved before it's allowed.
Can I jump in here, Janet, and say a few things?
Please, go.
Yeah, so I hear where you're coming from, Paula, and I'm kind of leaning that way a little bit. I thought it already, and I can't find it in here, it already said that there was an approval process for new crops. But you're talking, or GE crops, you're talking about new acreages to be added? Like
Okay,
of the same?
Yeah, so on packet, page 15, under number 1, GE crops, basically there's 2 bullet points under there. So we're accepting sugar beets and Teresa or Cassandra, correct me if I'm wrong, but how I read this is we're accepting sugar beets and corn that are GE because those are under current leases, etc. So, but the first bullet point is that if it's corn or sugar beets, additional acreages. So if they're buying new lease or new contracts, you know, with Great Western, they don't have to go through an approval process with the staff. I'm suggesting that they should go through, even if it's those 3 crop types or those 3 seed types, that they should go through some sort of review and approval with staff before it's allowed. And that the second bullet point is any other GE crop type does have to go through review and approval. So
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay.
Can I step in and clarify?
So one other comment I wanted, oh, go ahead.
Sure. So in the 2012 Cropland policy, and I'll read from the Cropland policy itself. It says, the glyphosate resistant crops permitted on BC POS land shall be corn and sugar beets. So There was a process for review. I wasn't here in 2011, 2012, but I understand there was a process for review. The glyphosate resistant corn or Roundup Ready corn and Roundup Ready sugar beets went through that process and were approved, as was the BT corn. So those have already been through an approval process. Any new crops, GE crops, would have to go through a process that's outlined in the cropland policy. So what staff is saying is those three, the Roundup Ready sugar beets, which we can set aside because that's a limited amount, but the Roundup Ready corn and BT corn, that any other tenants would be allowed to grow those as well, not just the 9 tenants that currently do.
Okay.
So just so I understand it, can you dive into that first bullet point? That's the one that confuses me. So you're saying that if I'm a farmer and I'm not growing those 3 GE crops right now, but I want to, I don't have to, under this proposal, I do not have to come to the county for review and approval.
Correct, because those were already approved in 2012. So those were already approved, and then so we were suggesting that any tenant could plant those. All of our tenants, when we talk about them reporting to us that they plant them, we do have all of our tenants tell us what they're planting, and we do kind of crop mapping every year, so we know what's being planted on which properties. So they would just do the normal reporting process to let us know what's being planted. But any new, if somebody came out with, I want to plant this, drought tolerant variety of corn, or, I would like to plant this Liberty Link variety of corn, Liberty being a different herbicide, then it would have to go through this approval process.
So in other words, as long as it's one of those 3 crop types, new acreage of those crop types can be added to the county's 16,000 ag acres without any review and approval.
Correct, since those were approved in 2012.
Okay, so that again is what I'd like to push back on a little bit by requiring any new acreage to go through a review and approval.
Okay, well, let's try this. Let's go back to, let's take the recommendation as is, vote on that. Might want to vote it up or down based on the conversation we just had. Then Paul, I'd ask you to make an amendment to that recommendation, and let's see where we're at there. Is that all right?
Sure.
Okay. So let's see where we're at as a vote. All those in favor of recommendation 2 on the GE crop, say aye.
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 All right. I think I'll tell you what. Let's just do a voice vote because I'm getting old. My hearing's gone. Jen.
Aye.
Janet.
Aye.
Trace.
Aye.
Tony.
Aye.
Paula.
Nay.
Heather.
Aye.
Jim. Aye. Okay. That motion. Let the record show that motion passes. And at this time, Paula, if you want to make an amendment suggestion to that recommendation, please do so.
Okay, my amendment is that any new GE crops with no exceptions. So in other words, even those 3, if it's new acreage, has to go through Boulder County staff review and approval.
Thank you, Paula. Is there a second?
Second.
Tony seconds. Discussion? No further discussion. Let's bring the amendment to a vote. I'll do a roll call vote again because of my hearing. The vote on the amendment to recommendation number 2. Jen Archuleta.
Nay.
Janet.
Nay.
Trace.
Nay.
Tony.
Aye.
Paula,
Aye.
Heather,
Yay,
I'm sorry, Heather,
yay,
A or nay?
yay. Sorry. Did you hear me this time?
Yeah, I think it was an A.
A nay.
A nay, thank
Nay.
you. And I'll vote A. So it's a 4-3 vote to the nays, let the record show. So that amendment did not pass on to the second recommendation. Okay. At this time, the chair will entertain a motion on the first recommendation. If anybody would like to make the motion.
I'm confused. What is your first recommendation?
I'm sorry, the first I'm sorry, I'm working off of the list, Paula, from the agenda that was sent on the looks like the 21st. The neonicotinoid
Okay,
phase out. The county will phase out pesticides effective the 12/31/2021, with the exception of the coated sugar beet seeds.
right.
Okay. Is there a motion at this time?
This is Paula. I move to approve the neonicotinoid phase out.
Is there a second?
Heather, this is Heather, second.
Thank you, Heather. Heather seconds. Is there at this time discussion? I'll make one comment. I have a neighbor who's a vicious beekeeper. I made the mistake the other day of congratulating her on her 89th birthday. No, I'm sorry, her 90th birthday, and she informed me, was mad at me that she was only 89. But she told me that she thought the bees, and I live on Mayhofer 15, she thought the bees this summer were as healthy as she's seen them in our areas for a while. And as Jen and I discussed a little bit after the public hearing last week in 2016 along this topic, we heard so much about bees and the impact on bees. So I thought it was interesting just by chance running her today, and she felt the bee population in East Boulder County was pretty healthy. So I'll just make that comment to the discussion. Any other further discussion?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment on some of the research that I've been doing in the last week or so, kind of related to that, which is that colony collapse is not necessarily the biggest problem, but individual bee loss is certainly a problem, and especially for other types of bees, not necessarily honeybees, but bumblebees. And then you think of all the beneficial insects in the soil, as well as the neonicotinoid coated seeds that birds eat, which definitely has a detrimental effect to them, according to Cornell University. So just my input on that.
Good, thank you, Paula.
And I would say, as a beekeeper, I am happy to see us starting to phase out the neonics. I think they're devastating, especially the native bee populations, but they're definitely affecting the honeybee populations as well. And so I'm very in favor of phasing out the neonics.
Others?
I'm really in favor of phasing out the neonics too, from a wildlife perspective, because they depend on a lot of the insects are the base of the food chain. And neonics have a great impact on the insects. It's great to see that we're headed towards a phase out of this.
Teresa, this is a question I have. This is Jim Krug. Question for you would be this: from the staff standpoint, because 12/31 is basically, we're looking at 10 weeks, 9 weeks out. We came with the Cropland policy update in October. Is that a fair time frame? That's the other thing I thought about today is 12/31/21, 9 weeks from now. Is that too soon? Is that unreasonable?
So our understanding, and this is from the input from Mad Ag, as well as our own, our own cursory research, that yes, they can, this is a realistic time frame, that farmers that are going to grow crops next year can get non-neonic coated seeds from two very large seed producers, Pioneer and Syngenta, that are not coated with neonics, and they can order them now would be good. I understand that the closer you get to planting time, the better idea you have of what the emergent pests are, what the forecast is looking like. But our understanding is they could order them as late as December and January. So yes, we do feel it's realistic.
Thank
Therese, are they coated with anything at all, or just not the neonic? Because it seems like, to my other question about the tillage and the having to do more tilling, if we don't have anything protecting the seeds or the crops, are they coated with something different?
That I know that there are a host of different seed coatings that are available. I do not know the exact answer to that question. Like if they're non-neonic, would our farmers choose a different kind of seed coating? That I don't know. Cassandra?
So we don't know what the impact on our soil health would be with alternatives, since we don't know what the alternatives are going to be.
So as opposed to, say, the neonic coating, are you talking about alternatives to coatings or alternatives to insecticides?
The neonic coating, that she said that the farmers could get the seeds that don't have the neonic coating.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, are they coated with something else that could be equally detrimental to our soil health, just not detrimental to the bees?
So there are all kinds of seed coatings that, for fungicides, for all kinds of things. So right now, what has been discussed in the past and what the commissioners did previously was just around the neonicotinoids and not around any other kind of coatings. So
we really don't know what they would get as an alternative and what that could do to our soil health.
Well, they could get completely uncoated seeds. So our Mad Ag representative had to leave at 7:30, I think, so he's not here to answer the question. But it's my understanding that through some smaller seed providers like Revolution Seed and things like that, that our tenants can order completely uncoated seeds if they want, so that don't have any other seed coatings. But that, there is that trade-off then of perhaps later, if there is insect pressure, they have to spray something.
Okay, I guess I don't know if this is the place for an amendment or just a friendly suggestion that we monitor what the alternative seeds they're going to get. If we're not going to have the neonic coating, we need to monitor the seeds that they are getting and what they may or may not be coated with and what they could do to our soil health and insects as well. Since, we don't know what they are going to pick, but we know they have a lot of options. We should make sure that we monitor that closely.
Mm-hmm. And I would see that as part of our larger initiative as we move forward towards a more robust integrated pest management program, where we are keeping track of that, but we're also keeping track of our pollinator populations and other things like that, those natural resources. So where we track those, and then we keep an eye on things. And if we see some kind of, drastic change or, steady decline or something, then we can assess and look at, what could be the causes of that and what are the impacts of the way we're farming.
Okay. No other discussion. At this time, we'll move to a vote. Again, I will try to do a roll call vote versus a INA to make sure everybody on an important topic, we're clear. So I'll come up the other way this time. So on the phase out, when I call recommendation number 1, we'll put to a vote. Heather?
Aye.
Paula?
Aye.
Tony?
Aye.
Trace?
Aye.
Janet?
Aye.
Jen?
Aye.
And I'm going to vote nay on this one. I'm concerned. My concern is just because of the timing a little bit, but and I think I would like to see the ag. I'd like to see Mike and the ag group. I'd like to see you guys, Cassandra, work with the farmers to maybe discuss that a little more. So, but anyway, let the record show that by a 6-1 vote, recommendation number 1 was approved. Okay. At this time, Therese?
Yeah, I would like one more clarification, and this is not a vote.
Okay.
But as we do the edits to the cropland policy, you saw Cassandra's example of how we are trying to narrow it down and just keep it as a strict policy document. Our question to you is, would you like us to send you the clean document for the November POSAC, or do you want to see the redlined version to see how it was changed? What's your preference?
I'd like the red line version.
Ditto.
Yeah, this is Trace. I think red line is good.
This is
I'm fine.
Janet. How about both? Can you do both?
We can do both.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, yes.
Either's fine. Either's fine.
That way we can compare.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All righty.
Yeah, this Trace, and I don't know if everybody has Microsoft Word or is familiar with the editing tools, but I like that a lot because you can switch back and forth between, the revised copy, edits, previous, and I would like to see it in that format.
The only challenge there, Trace, you have to remember which version you're working on, which copy you've learned.
Right.
So I'm joking, I edited a whole document and then deleted all the edits, which was good.
Sure.
That was
Okay.
good. But yes, Teresa, hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, that does. And
Okay.
also just, I know a lot of you have not heard a whole lot of policies, seen a whole lot of policy documents coming your way. Again, we are looking for big items on the policy. You like this, you don't like that.
Yeah.
Not the
Commas. You don't want commas and capitalizations?
Precisely. We do have an editor for that. Great. Are you now ready for the director's update?
Yes, could we please have the director's update?
Yes. Thank you all for your patience, and thank you all who were able to sit through that 6-hour public hearing. It was a really, I thought, very good public dialogue. And that's what we really appreciate about you, listening to it and then coming back with really thoughtful questions and a really good discussion today. So thank you for your work on POSAC. So just to keep these on your radar, so the next upcoming meetings on November 4th at 1 p.m., the county commissioners are going to do just like you did here today. They will decide on the cropland policy update. We will be presenting them with your recommendations in addition to our recommendations. So if you're interested, you can join that public meeting. There will be no hearing to listen to their discussion. Also on November 4th, they have at 3:30 the Mayhofer Farm decision meeting. Again, thank you all of you who were able to join that joint hearing that we had with Louisville and Lafayette Open Space Advisory Boards or committees. We thought that was a great discussion. We were enthusiastic to work with these students and thought they did an excellent job. And just, it was also our launch of live translation. So it was translated into Spanish at the same time. So again, thank you for your time on that. We will be taking that to the county commissioners on November 4th as well. So the commissioners will be busy on November 4th. And then your November POSAC meeting is moved up a week because of Thanksgiving. So just make sure it's on your calendar for November 18th. Then staff updates. So we have a big event coming up. The Outdoor Creations will be held at the Great Frame Up, and it is a plein air exhibit again. It is the welcoming reception. The grand opening reception is November 12th from 5 to 8 p.m. and we encourage you all to come. There's always beautiful artwork, wonderful food, good conversation. So I would encourage you to put that on your calendars.
What time again?
5 to 8.
And that's on what date?
Friday, November 12th at the Great Frame Up in Longmont, on Main Street in Longmont. We've hosted it there in the past. It's a wonderful place to exhibit this beautiful artwork. There's an opportunity to buy it. There will be prizes, you know, awards for the best paintings. And part of the proceeds from the sale of that go to the Parks and Open Space Foundation. So it's a good event all the way around.
Good. Super.
So some more updates. The Hesse shuttle season ended on October 10th, so not that long ago, with a record almost 34,000 riders. So a huge success. Hopefully a few of you got up there and got to try that out. It's a wonderful way to get to our nearest Indian Peaks Wilderness area. The high Isle fire recovery work continues. We have finished, I've told you that in the past, we finished all the mulching. We have got most of the upper watershed structures in. We are now in the design, more detailed design for flood work along Gear Canyon, which is really basically right along the access road between the lower parking lot and the first parking lot. So the southern entrance remains closed. It'll be closed till next spring, but we are using this opportunity to get a lot of other trail work done up there, including the High Isle 2 Skills Loop, which you approved when we did the High Isle 2 management plan. It's near the Corral Trailhead, and it's an opportunity to give new mountain bikers the opportunity to learn mountain biking skills. And so the staff are having fun making that. The trail actually goes through the old caboose up there, or the rail car. So it's going to be fun. For those of you who aren't expert mountain bikers, I'd encourage you, once the trail's back open, to go try it out. And then we also are investigating a temporary, whether it needs to be temporary or a permanent reroute, because our golden eagle nest that was destroyed in the fire, I think we may have told you, it rebuilt its nest, but it moved its nest down the cliff face, and now it's too close to the trail. So there's still a lot of work we're doing out there with the trails and the fire recovery. Many of you know that the Boulder County Cooperative Extension is housed at the Natural Resource Building at the fairgrounds. We had a flood there. It was a frozen pipe burst. And so they've been displaced. In addition to the pandemic, a lot of their office stuff was destroyed. So we've been working with county facilities to rebuild their office spaces, re-equip them, and they were able to move back in. So that's a good success story. The fairgrounds master plan. So we have a consulting firm that we are working with, and they have gone through some focus groups for the fairgrounds master plan, and now it's time to open it up to the public. So on Tuesday, November 16th, from 5 to 7:30, there will be an open house. So if anyone has special interest in how the fairgrounds are used, I would encourage you to go, or tell your friends to go on out there. It'll be at the exhibit building at the fairgrounds, which is at 9595 Nelson Road. We completed the 5-year visitor study. I don't know if any of you were lucky enough to be hiking on our trails and come across one of our staff or volunteers or senior tax workers that were out conducting the 5-year study on our open space. We typically do it on the 0s and 5s, like 2020 or 2025. We delayed it last year because it was crazy and the pandemic really was not an indicative year. So we did hold the study again this year. We're compiling the results. We got more respondents than we need to get within our confidence intervals as we look at the results. So we'll bring those results to you in a meeting in the next several months. We have a lot of staff vacancies you may be aware of. Our recreation and facilities manager position, we are in the middle of interviews. We had 40 applicants, and we've narrowed it down. So we're getting closer on that. The resource management division manager position, my old position, closes this Sunday. So if any of you are interested and you want to put your hat in the ring, you have until Sunday at midnight to submit your application. Again, tell your friends. They have the weekend to apply for that job. The senior ranger, that's another position, a very key position in our department. Same deal, they're down to 3 finalists and they're doing their final interviews next week. We are again doing the cut your own holiday trees. So our foresters are using an area that we thinned 15 years ago, and the trees are now the right size for holiday trees. And we know that there's a huge interest in this, and so we do a lottery. So anyone can put their name into the lottery hat by Sunday, November 14th, and then we will do a drawing for about 100 trees. So that is what I have for our updates, and it looks like Trace has his hand up.
Yeah, Trace, thank you. Trace Baker here. Is the senior ranger position being offered as bilingual or not?
I believe it is not mandatory.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? No? I would just echo, Therese, what you said about the November 12th. I've gone to it a couple of years and I found it neat. It's a neat event. So good work to Karen and all those involved with that.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, or can we adjourn for the evening? Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Meeting adjourned. Next meeting on November, tell me what that is.
18th.
18th, November 18th. Everybody have a good Halloween. Be safe.
Great, thank you. Goodbye.
Okay, good night all.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.